Okay, so in the previous session, we created this circular image here where basically we put an image within a div and then we did some CSS for that image to make it appear circular. In this one, we are going to add the mouse over effect so that when you go over top of the image, much like these, you'll get a rollover of 3 lines of hobbies or interests, that sort of thing. So let's get to it. All right, first thing we've got to do is add that text in. Now I'm going to put the text right in the same div that the image is in. So we'll just do div, and we'll have 3 lines of text. I'm going to put in motorcycles, woodworking, and obviously I have an interest in web development, even if I can't spell it. Looking at how these line up, I know that web development is going to be the longest one, so I'm going to put it in the center of those 3, and that way we'll just have more room for it. Thinking ahead a little bit as far as that goes. Div. Oh, so I just messed up the div. And there we go. Close the div. So basically we've got a div with an image and another div inside of it. Before I go any further, I always say you should check your GitHub. So I'm connected to GitHub. I'm going to go ahead and check everything just to make sure I haven't changed anything. And I haven't. And as I demonstrated before, I'm going to continue with the idea of creating a branch so that if things get really messed up, we can go back to a good place. So I am going to create a branch. Click New Branch and type in, let's call this text over. We'll just say text over image. That makes it completely clear what this branch is about. When I create the branch, it is automatically switched to, and I'm on that branch now. Now, since I didn't save anything, we're good. I'm going to go up here, save this, and now we should see that there's changes within this branch. I'm going to go over, refresh the page, and you'll see nothing. Well, that's disturbing because I expected there to be something here since I just put this div in. Let's go ahead and do, okay, so I know what's going on. Nothing to stress about, perhaps. This is, you remember that we made it appear circular by doing a overflow hidden on the image. We did this overflow hidden. Well, when I uncheck that, that text is actually outside of the box because the image takes up the full 200 by 200. That's why it's not showing up. I was actually worried for a minute. So I'm going to leave this unchecked for right now so that we can see that we are getting where we want to go. Notice that all of the text is it's just in a line. It's not 3 separate lines. Well, the way we create a separate line is we put in a BR tag. And that is basically just a line break. And now if we go back, what we should see, I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick. When I refresh this, I'm going to lose the changes I just made. So I'm going to refresh it. and then uncheck the overflow hidden again real quick. So now we have motorcycle, web development, and woodworking. The next thing we need to do is actually move this up so that it is in the, it's basically overlaying the image. So I am going to give this a class of overlay, because that's exactly what it's going to be doing. It's going to be overlaying the image. Now, the other thing that we're going to want to do is when we're overlaying that image, we're also going to want to make it so that the image doesn't show up, so that you can read the text. So we're going to have to do some real slight CSS here, and this should work. Now, let me go ahead and save this, because I want to make sure I have the latest version. And then I'm going to go to the About CSS, because this is going to be the only place it exists. And this text that I'm wanting to work on is after the images, but it's before the H1 tag. So I am putting it in order in the CSS on where it appears in the HTML file. So dot for class, overlay. The first thing we want to do is we want to have the text centered. So the text align, center, that should center it. And then for the div itself, we want it to actually be, we're going to actually position this so that it is at the top of the parent div. So I'm going to tell it position okay, with positions there's several choices, as you can see here. There's absolute, fixed, relative, sticky, static, sticky. Relative is relative to where it's at already on the page. Absolute is absolute to its first parent div with a positioning on it. This gets tricky, so we might have to do some weird things to get things to work. Fixed is fixed on the page. Doesn't matter. It stays where it's at. So we're going to do a absolute. And then we want it top. And basically, we don't want to position it left or right. We want to put it to the top. So top 0 pixels. Let's save this and see what happens. Save. Refresh. Well, okay. That put it to the top, all right. But it put it to the top of the page. Remember what I said about the first container with a position on it? Well, what that means is there's no position defined for any element so far. And so it is going to the top of the HTML page itself. So if we put in position relative, that's not going to change. Helps if I actually spell it right. Relative. That's not going to change anything about the about image itself, because relative is the default for how images are rendered on the page. I'm going to save this. Hit refresh again, and now you can see, it's not very clear, but you can see it's right over top of it's over top of the image. We can't see it because it is, well, it blends in with the image, potentially. So let's go ahead and make this work. We need to move it down some, and right now it is not taking up the full width, because when you position something, it makes it an inline element. As soon as you start positioning it, no longer acts as a block level element. It acts as a span or an inline element, so it only takes up as much room as it needs. So to make sure this shows up correctly on the overlay, we need to set a width. And we'll set a width of 200 pixels. And we also need to set a height so that it works and we'll set a height of 200 pixels as well. Now, if we do a little bit of math, we can figure out pretty much what the height is on this before we set a height. But we can do something a little bit quicker and a little bit neater if we set the width. So now you notice that it's better because it's taking up the full width. It's still up high. We need to move it down to where it's centered. But what we can do is now we can look at that element. So this overlay element, we can click on computed, and it will tell us that it is 69 pixels high. Now, we do 69, might as well say 70. The container div is 200, so that is 130 left over, which is 65. So we still want, so what we'll need is 65 pixels of padding on the top. So I'm going to say padding on the top of 65 pixels. And I'm going to set a height as well so that it takes up the full height of the container. So height 200 pixels. Let's save this. Hit refresh. All right, looking better, right? It's centered. Now all we got to do is take care of that background color. Now there's a couple of different ways we can do this. Let's do the first thing that comes to mind at least. And that is, let's just set a background color. Helps if I spell it right. I was wondering why it didn't show up right. Background color. And we'll just do a gray. Actually, I drink coffee. Let's do C0FF33. And let's see what that gives us. All right, so that works, right? Well, the only problem is it's that way regardless. It's stuck on that way. So how do we tell it to only show up when the mouse is over this element? Well, that's actually quite easy. All we have to do is tell it that when I'm over the about image, so div.about image, and this is called a pseudo class. We want to do, and this is why this is so nice, hover. So basically, this is saying when you're on a div, about image, and your mouse is over top of it, affect the dot overlay that's a part of it. So it's actually hovering over the containing div that triggers this image and everything. So let's go ahead and let's save this and refresh it and see what we get. Look. Pretty sweet, right? And that's all we needed to do. I really don't particularly like that color, so let's do coffee and spell the coffee with 2 E's on the end. We'll do save. Do a refresh. And, it's not really coffee colored coffee, but it works. So that's how I would do that. If we wanted to actually go further with this, we could basically take each one of these blocks, so each one of these about image, and create more of them and stack them on top of each other or stack them side by side, and basically create a gallery like they had on the About Our Team. Okay, I've made the changes. Everything's looking the way I want it to. The last thing to do, of course, is, and I forgot this myself, I had to go back and do it, is let's go ahead and make the commit. So we go down to our GitHub client, take a look at the changes we've made. We can see we've added this CSS in, and we've added a very small amount of HTML into this. So I am going to create a summary is text overlay, added text to overlay image, added text and CSS to overlay image. I'm going to go ahead and commit this to text image, and I'm going to switch back to the master branch again, and then I'm going to merge the text over image into master. So I've got the master branch selected. I want to merge this branch in. I'm going to click submit. And if I look at my history, I now see I have text overlay. I can see the changes that I've made. Text overlay. I can see the changes that I've made. And now I can push those back up to GitHub, so that if anything happens to this computer, I still have all my code. And that's at least one good reason to use GitHub. Something that I thought about is we should also talk about, we've got these other branches now, and we don't need these anymore. So the easiest way to get rid of these branches is if you go up to the branch, you can actually, it doesn't give you the option to delete because we're on the master branch. We can now switch to those individual branches and go to branch and then delete. And it'll ask, are you sure you want to delete that? I'm going to say yes, because I've already merged it into master. I don't need to keep it anymore. And I'm going to do the same with text over image. And all this does is really just keep things neater on your computer. Select delete. It asks for confirmation, and we're done. Okay, well, thank you. That was easy and not nearly as long as the last one. My apologies. I do try to keep these under, 20 minutes or so. Actually, I try to keep them under 15. And I'm looking at the marker, and I see that I'm actually already over that. Have fun.